why is 12 the magic number when it comes to sales? And who is Josh from PwC? This is the Leeds Business Podcast, and you're your host, Phil Fraser. I'm a business sounding board. Think somewhere between a business coach and a business mentor. If you're a business owner and you're feeling the pain and confusion of being lonely at the top, give me a call. I can help remove the stress and lack of clarity that you're feeling that comes with running your business. So, in this week's episode, we speak to Zandra Moore, CEO of PanIntelligence. Zandra shares with us a super cheap, really effective marketing tactic that she used and that can get your business noticed, the triggers that brought about a successful Series A funding round, why she didn't change her business card when she was promoted to CEO, the key role that an incubator played in her journey, and the need for support and structures for female founders. Plus, there's a great how-to when it comes to taking a business step you're afraid of. So, to make sure you never miss out on every episode of the Leeds Business Podcast, sign up to our priority list at www.leedsbusinesspodcast.com. Everyone that signs up gets a free gift to help their business. So, let's get into what is a really engaging and compelling interview. So, today's guest is CEO of PanIntelligence, Zandra Moore. Good afternoon, Zandra.
Good afternoon, Phil. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Great to have you on. So let's start the business journey at PanCredit. So give us a brief overview of how you got to PanCredit.
So I found myself with two children, and it's quite difficult when you've been a sort of sales director of software businesses and going back into employment with two young children and wanting to strike that balance. And, you know, somebody in the family kind of does at some point when you've got a young family. So I decided to set up my first business, which was a sales consultancy, helping other startup software businesses get their go-to-market proposition, their first customers, all that kind of stuff. And PanCredit, I actually put a pin in a map because my children's nursery was around the corner from my house. I lived in Carvey at the time, a place called Appley Bridge. And I put a pin in a map and I said, well, where are the software vendors within a 5-mile radius of my house? Because if I need to go back and pick the kids up from nursery then. And PanCredit was literally 2 miles up the road, literally a pin in the map. And I went onto LinkedIn and I contacted the Peter Constance. I did a bit of research on him. He was the CEO at the time. And I found out that he was they were the sponsor of Jamie Peacock, who was the captain of Leeds Rhinos, the player sponsor. And I was a trustee for Leeds Rugby Foundation at the time. So I sat as, I was on the board of the Leeds Rugby Foundation. I was like, oh, there's something in common here. And, we know personalization is the key to getting people's attention, don't we? So I sent him a LinkedIn message. This is very early in the days of LinkedIn. We're going back to something like 2010 when LinkedIn was really only starting to be used as an outreach tool. And he replied and he went, yeah, sure, come in and have coffee. Tell me what you do. And we had a chat and he brought in another one of the directors and they told me they had this guy sat in the corner of a room building this bit of tech that they were selling to their banking customers. And they thought they could probably sell it outside of their core market and would I fancy giving that a go? So that was, one of my first clients in my SaaS consultancy business. And I worked with them for 3 years as a client first. And then, they persuaded me that they'd like me to get more involved. And then the opportunity to buy the IP came up. So, yeah, they were a client first through my consultancy business. Yeah.
It's funny you should mention Jamie Peacock. He is going to be a guest on the show in about 3 weeks' time. So thanks for the plug there, Zandra. So keep an eye out for Jamie's coming on shortly. Okay, so did you actually work for PanCredit or were you still consulting for them at the time?
So I consulted for them until we agreed to do the management buyout. And then in order to kind of manage that transaction, I then became employed to then do the management buyout, if that makes sense. There was a period where I was employed to then become part of the management team that acquired the IP. So myself and Ken and one of the other then directors of PanCredit, he was the financial controller, Mike Cripps. We then led the management buyout of PanIntelligence from the business as they sold their business to Equinity, big share registrar in the city. We were this kind of loss-making, scrappy team of 6 people building, a piece of tech that, frankly, the rest of the business didn't quite understand. They were building this very large legacy ERP system for lending to banks, which was sort of being hand cranked behind the scenes because it's like 25 years old. And we were sort of modern tech, data analytics, and It just didn't quite sit together whilst it worked. Technically, the teams are very different and the skills in the team. So the management buyout worked really well for both parties and really sort of helped the transaction for the PanCredit business. And then, we literally ran a process. We got the IP valued by Baker Tilly, and then found some friends and family that sort of knew me and Mike and the team to put some cash in to give us some cash flow, and carried the server across the car park and squatted in somebody else's office for 3 months whilst we tried to work out what we'd done, which was the start.
Okay, so let's just roll back slightly there. So, people talk about MBOs and people talk about spin outs and stuff like that. Talk us through the process? Did somebody sort of sit down and go, "Hey, Zandra, I've got this great idea. Should we buy the IP and set the business?" Yeah. How did the concept start, and what did the process look like?
Yeah, so Ken, myself, and Mike were really running this kind of little product inside a bigger company, and we were made aware, Ken and myself, that the business was for sale, and we'd already had conversations on long car journeys going to see prospects about if we could buy this IP, would we? Because we both could see the opportunity and the potential, and we'd already started selling it outside the banking sector. So we just knew we had something that the rest of the market wasn't providing. And we said, well, we know that we weren't generating a lot of revenue. We're still loss making. We weren't it wasn't what the business was selling to the market, PanIntelligence. They were selling the PanCredit business, and we were barely aligned with their P&L, really. So we knew there was a sort of an undervalued piece of technology. So we'd had the conversations on the long car journeys about if we had an opportunity, would we? And then it was Mike, who is a CFO, who we spoke to, who said, well, why don't we just get the IP valued, and because that's going to be the crux of it, really. Are they happy to let us buy it off them for an amount of money that we think it's worth? So and that was it. It really wasn't much more complicated. Baker Tilly came and valued the IP, and then as PanCredit got sold, as part of that, we cheaped out the staff, and we ran the process with Eversheds to kind of get the business kind of spun out. And I wasn't as heavily involved as Mike was in that process, because he was also an exiting director of the PanCredit business. So whereas the round that we did for raising growth capital and bringing the private equity was something I led. So, but it was pretty straightforward. It wasn't a difficult process for us at that stage.
So what sort of timeline? When are we talking about then?
2014. So it was March 2014 when we.
Okay, so 2014. So in effect, you're a startup with a little bit of headwind. So it wasn't for a blank piece of paper. Did you have a business plan, or was it just like, hey, we've got an idea, let's see where it rolls?
Yeah, we did have a business plan, but it was written in Word, and I wouldn't say it was as comprehensive. And we didn't have we didn't have a model that we run our business on now. The model that we run our business on is incredibly detailed. At the time, we had about £200,000 worth of revenue, but most of it was consultancy. It wasn't licensing, really. We'd done a lot of consulting to deliver our product to a few of our early customers. So we had some revenue, we had some customers, about 10 customers. And so it wasn't, we were certainly, very much, it was a risk. And we also had, the product was built in something called Flash, which for anybody who's got any tech knowledge will know.
I remember Flash.
End of life by Adobe. And we knew we had to completely rewrite the platform. So we had this kind of mountain to climb anyway. We knew what we'd built was the right solution to the problem. We just now needed to build it in the right tech. So, right. So that's sort of where we started. So our biggest problem was, can we just get ourselves established? Because we'd been sat in a bigger organization that had HR systems, CRM systems, banks. It took us 3 months to set up a bank account. And, we just had the basics in the first 6 months. So the business plan's a business plan, but actually you've just got to get yourself operational so you can still bill the clients that you've got and still deliver the services to the customers and still receive phone calls. So that felt like the first 6 months of just actually almost like starting again. Like it really was a starter at that point. And then after that, it became much more about rebuilding the platform and winning more customers. But the first 3 years were very much about just trying to get some traction and get some operational vigor in the business, because we had none at the time.
Okay. So you're a real startup, and you have to rebuild what you bought anyway.
Yeah.
couple of questions from that then. How did it feel going from sort of employed in a proper big company to there's 3, 4, 5 of us in a rented office? Here we go. Because I know lots of people have that sort of. Some people have got that feeling inside them they'd love to do it, and some people think I can't do it. How did that sort of startup feel like?
What have we done? Because I'd literally emptied my savings to buy the IP, and I always knew I wanted. I'd helped a lot of startups kind of grow and exit and be successful in a sales role, generate kind of revenues, help them to become SaaS when SaaS wasn't even a word, when it was cloud or online. So I kind of knew that this is where I wanted to be. At the time, it wasn't about being a CEO. Actually, it was about having a piece of it, being invested in the business where I could see that I could get return for that input. That was where my focus was: being a shareholder, having a stake in it, investing into something. At the time, I wasn't the CEO. At the time, I was the sales and marketing director. Was the title, and the CFO Mike became MD, managing director. So we had quite classic British titles. We're now very American in our titles in the business, but at the time that's where we were. So it felt like quite a big step for me, having not, whilst I'd set up a business before, it was a consulting business. But I knew I wanted to grow a software company. That's what I knew how to do, and I was helping other people do that. It was just super hard getting some of the basics done, like getting a bank account. It was ridiculously hard to get a bank account up and running. You take for granted all the things when you're in an organization operationally that just exist to make your day job easy. Just getting email working and just receiving phone calls, and there was just so many basics that just felt a lot harder and took a lot longer than we anticipated before we could really go out and start really peddling the market. So yeah, it did feel like a proper startup. But the one thing that we did struggle with was hiring, because when you're that small, it's super hard to attract talent. Those first sales hires, when I was the only salesperson and hiring my first salesperson to team, trust me, when you don't have that kind of traction or referenceability in the market, or, you're really an unknown entity and you're literally squatting in a room that can probably accommodate 6 people and there's already 6 of you in it, and you're asking someone else to sit in the same office, it's hard. So hiring is super hard at that stage. And you do kind of lean in on people that and in your networks. And, that's why so many people end up hiring sort of friends and family, don't they? And so this stage is the only people that will believe that they can do it. Yeah.
I remember, it's funny you mentioned that. I remember our first hire, we had an office over a sandwich shop, and I thought, I can't bring somebody here. So I went to my old ad agency that I used to work at and used their offices, and just said, "Oh, this is our ad agency. We're just using their offices to interview." I'm conscious, actually, we've not mentioned, and you have to do this in very simple terms because we have a simplistic audience. What do PanIntelligence do? Come on, really simplify it for us.
I will do. So most businesses will use something for reporting on what goes on in their organization. They might use a data visualization tool like a dashboard. They might have heard of things like Power BI or Tableau, things like that. And they've probably also used things like reporting, where you get a PDF in your inbox on a Monday morning telling you what's happened in the last week. And if you're really excited by AI, you may be starting to think about prediction and, how do I predict outcomes from data? And all of those things are about data, essentially, and the data you've got in your organization. And what our software does is it allows people to visualize the data in their organization easily for themselves, report on it, send information out to other people about what's happening in PDF or different formats reports, and also predict outcomes from data. And our customers are not necessarily businesses directly. Our customers are software vendors that are already doing the job of collecting all of that data and providing some software into their business. We become their reporting engine. So a lot of people don't know that they use us. We're always white labeled and in somebody else's tech. So we're tech inside tech. So B2B2B. And therefore we're always part of somebody else's product, doing things like helping them to see their data more easily, produce reports or receive predictions. I hope that's okay.
That makes a lot of sense. Step up from Excel then.
Just I'm trying to get people off Excel if we can. There's no data security in
fantastic.
Excel.
Fantastic. Okay, so you've got this brand new startup. There's 6 months trying to get everything set up and get going. How did you go? I mean, obviously I assume that's quite a big tech sell. How did you go out and sell this? How did you start off?
So I'm quite old school, and it's always worked for me. So I've always been a saleswoman. That's what I've done. I'm a queen hustler. I love it. It's my favourite part of what I do every day, and still very much embedded in the sales engine in this business. And you know what? It's classic stuff. It's understand who your ideal customer is. Be ruthless in making sure you're only speaking to people that fits that profile, and do your work on the research. So you spend your time. It used to be Dun and Bradstreet we used. I'd get a list of all the companies in the UK in a particular sector with a certain turnover and a certain number of employees. And then I'd use LinkedIn to find out who the people I should be speaking to. And I used to write them letters, literally write them letters. I'd write them a letter, personalised, explaining what we do, referencing somebody like them that we worked with. So I'd always go after the same sector where we had referenceability. And then it's just pick up the phone until they find the answer. And you're sending them a letter, then you send them a second letter. And when you send someone a letter with a stamp on it and a handwritten envelope, people tend to remember it. And when you're very clear about who the people you want to win as business, you could be quite focused about it. And to be honest with you, it's super cheap to do, takes a bit of time. It gets noticed. And if you do the follow-up, and we have this magic number 12, which you don't give up 12 times, you have to try and call someone and contact them 12 times before you give up. If you haven't tried 12 times, you're not tired enough. So that's a classic old school way of outreach. And that's how I've always worked. And it's how our team work here still. I mean, we do some more sophisticated stuff these days, but actually the stuff that works is that personalized approach to an ideal customer that you know is who you want to win because they're a good fit for you. So that's how I started and still do it now.
Fantastic. And I've actually used personalized handwritten letters before. And, we talk about open rates in newsletters and mailers and stuff like that. The open rate on a letter is almost 100%, isn't it? Because you get your post in the morning and you go through it, bill, mailer, handwritten letter. It's the first thing you open, isn't it? It's just logical.
Of course it is. And I think the challenge in today's economy is people aren't in their offices as much as they used to be, but actually people are back more now. So if you do things to people's offices, they are more likely to receive them. Maybe a week after you've actually got it through the door, but they will usually find their way into. And people actually forward them onto people's home addresses now, I've noticed as well. So it's interesting.
Yeah, fantastic. So so you've sent out all these mailers out, and you've got some traction going. Sort of what was sort of like the next sort of major landmark in the growth of the business from there?
So one of our customers, end users, was using Sage 200, and it's quite a big legacy ERP system. And they said, what we really want is just an out-of-the-box set of reports that we can use. And they introduced us to a reseller that they were working with, which were based down the road, literally around the corner, called IMS. They've sold to another company now. And I went to see him and he said, if you built something out of the box, you could sell it through every reseller in the Sage channel as an add-on to the Sage product, because what they've got is, frankly, no good. Nobody can do anything with it. And people are an ERP system like Sage, once it's embedded in your business, quite hard to unwind because it's running all of your kind of financials and orders and invoicing. So we struck up a partnership with Sage. We, over the course of a couple of years, we onboarded over 30 reseller partners, and those resellers took our pre-configured solution for that product out to market, and we did a revenue share, which is a really great way to scale the sales organization when there's like 6 or 7 of you, because actually you've suddenly got 2 or 3 salespeople in 30 resellers, and all you're doing is sales training them on your product, giving them a proposition that they make enough money on, because then, let's face it, they're commission orientated organizations. And that really helps us to scale our sales operation without investing too heavily in an internal team. So we used a kind of channel model to accelerate our revenue growth without having to invest in direct sales. We're 100% direct sales now, but that's how we started. And I'd done that with another couple of organizations, but the Sage channel was our biggest channel. And then we went and did that with other companies. We found other organizations where we pre-configured solutions. It was like a sell through, but we're still kind of badged as their product, if that makes sense. So Advanced Computer Software is probably one of the largest independent software group. Access, another very large independent software company, is how we worked with all of them. And we won an award. That was the landmark when Sage went, "You're great, we love you guys," and we won an award, our first award, and we got very giddy. I think it was in 2015 or 2016 we won our first award as an independent company, and it's a Sage Award. So yeah.
Fantastic. So was that an opportunity or was that a plan?
So I'd always intended to build a channel model when we spun the business out, because I knew how to do that. I also knew we didn't have the cash runway to suddenly build a sales team of 5, 6, 7 people. And we were also replatforming the product at the same time. And frankly, the Sage product was pretty legacy. So the fact that we were replatforming weren't exactly leading edge tech, they were quite forgiving of, because what we had was still way ahead of what they had. So it's always about, perspective and frames of reference, isn't it? So to them, we were modern tech. But if I'd have gone out to the SaaS community at the time, they'd have gone, "Your legacy," right? So you've just got to know where you fit in the market. And so we modernized their platform enough, whilst it gave us the time to rebuild, which worked. It worked for us all, and it also just got us to an ARR that, frankly, meant that when we needed to go and raise money, because we knew we needed to, there was no question that we'd hit that point where we'd need to raise some growth capital, that there would be a better business around revenue to get people excited by. So yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned raising capital. Before we talk about that, because I know lots of people are interested in how you do it, how you go about it, what it's like. I need to tell our listeners all about the Leeds Business Podcast Fair Deal. The Leeds Business Podcast Fair Deal has 2 parts to it. My side of the deal is I bring you brilliant, inspirational, and fascinating business leaders every week, free of charge, people like Zandra. And your side of the deal has 2 parts to it, Mr. Listener or Mrs. Listener. Side number 1, or part number 1, is you have to recommend this podcast to one other person who you think will get benefit from it. And part number 2 is you need to write us a review, either at Apple Podcasts on their app, at podchaser.com, or give us a thumbs up on Spotify, or if you're watching on YouTube, give us a wave, Zandra, to everybody who's on YouTube. There you go, Zandra's waving if you're listening. Give us a thumbs up on this episode on YouTube. That's it. That's the Leeds Business Podcast Fair Deal. Sound like a fair deal, Zandra?
Amazing deal.
There you go. Zandra says it's an amazing deal, so you have to do it. You have to do it. Okay, so we were just about to talk about your growth capital raise. How did that come about? Talk us through the process, and at what point did you think, right, okay, we've got to do this?
So a couple of things happened. My co-founder Mike had a period of ill health, as did my other co-founder Ken, and we suddenly had this key man dependency moment where I was like, okay, we need to build this team out, and I need some people in this business alongside me, just in case. There's a little bit of that. If I'm being really candid, there was a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Equally, we just hit a point in our sort of ARR where it felt like we could go out and do a Series A as opposed to a seed round, where we get a decent valuation. And also one of our other seed investors, Peter Constant, who is one of our was the founder of PanCredit, had shown interest in seeing if he could get some cash off the table, as did Mike, who'd had a period of ill health. So I proposed, it might be a good time for me to step up. Mike was very happy for me too. So I stepped up as CEO. At that point, it was a case of, well, what am I going to do to build a plan to grow this business? Because it was, I was sales and marketing director, so I was taking the reins. And it just coincided about 2 or 3 months after I started as CEO. A plucky guy called Josh reached out to me from PwC and said, "Have you received my emails?" And I said, yes. And he said, please, will you join our first tech incubator in Leeds? And I was like, okay, well, it's £5,000. I don't really have the time. I've just started this job. I've really got to get my feet under the table and make sure that I know what to do. He said it would be the best thing. And he said, but, if I could do it, because he's going to get in trouble because he doesn't have any other women on the cohort, and he really, really, really wants me. And I was like, okay. So I joined this cohort actually reluctantly, because I thought I didn't have the time. I didn't think I'd learn anything. Best thing I ever did, because I suddenly got introduced to the whole world of corporate finance, advisors. I didn't know anybody in CF. I didn't know what PE meant or VC meant. I had no idea about the language around investment. I didn't understand what the rounds were about, how they were structured. And, saying I really was super green, even though I'd done an MBO, other than Baker Tilly valuing the IP and as cheaping people out of the business, my understanding of business was predominantly as being, either a startup as a consulting business where you're just a limited, it's you and a few bodies and it's a consulting organization, but this kind of complex process investment I knew nothing about. So that really helped give me the grounding of language and introduce me to the people. And it accelerated my timeline because it made me believe actually that we were more ready than I thought we were. Because we'd spun out of PanCredit, there were actually some really quite foundational principles of how we built the business that were more mature than the stage that we were at, if that makes sense, because we've been part of a bigger company. So we were very critical of where we were at and the stage we're at. But actually, as we brought people in to look at things, they were like, actually, you're more ready than you think. So I went out and looked for an interim kind of CFO whilst Mike was stepping down. And that's when I met Phil. And he was actually working for Anna at the Data Shed. So we've been sharing a CFO for the last however many years. So Phil, bless him, has been working in two female data founders in Leeds. God love him. He must have the patience of a saint. And he came in and helped me build the financial model that I needed for the round. And me and him worked together on, the way in which that model would be structured, all the assumptions, and really helped me to understand the model that you'd need to build. And without that, I wouldn't have necessarily been as ready as I thought we could be. So when we actually went to speak to people like Grant Thornton and quite a few of the other, we courted about 4 different advisory firms to run a process. We had this model. I had a deck, a basic deck, and I had a good understanding of the landscape and language, having been on the program, this PwC program, to feel like I had the confidence to have these conversations and also just know who the players were. Without that, I don't know where to start or even how to even begin to approach that. So that was super important. I think any founder that hasn't been through some kind of accelerator or scale up program that's thinking about raising investment, definitely do that first. It's just at least start speaking to other founders and people that have been on it is really helpful. I must have spoken to about 10 different founders who'd raised money because I got introduced to them through having been on this program, which is really helpful. And then Grant Thornton won the competition for who was going to run our process for us. It was I say competition. It did feel a bit like that. I think we were definitely in a good place, so it was great. And they did a kind of fixed fee arrangement, which a lot of them work on a percentage of the total value of the transaction, whereas this was just a fixed fee, so we knew exactly what it was going to cost us, which is great. And then they ran the process end to end, and they were able to identify the best fit funds for us at the stage that we were at that are most likely to fit with our business. So I think we went out to about 100 with our IM, which was great. And we pitched to, I think it was about 25 in the end, that we shortlisted that down to. Half were sort of in London, half were in the north and across the north of England.
Wow. There's about 10 different topics in there that I want to pick at those threads. I'll try and do them logically as you said them. The first thing you mentioned was, and you sort of stepped over it quite quickly, was the step up from sales and marketing director to CEO. How did that feel? And did you have any training on it? Any support? It's quite a big step for somebody. Or was that just like, here's a change of business card, off you go?
I didn't change my job title on my email for 3 months. And I had a personal coach at the time that I was working with. Trying to say, I don't know why, I just don't feel I'm ready to say I'm a CEO yet. I had a massive, massive imposter syndrome. I know people talk about it. I had massive imposter syndrome. I just wasn't sure what that really meant, because it was still a small business. We were still only like 20 people at the time, 15, 20 people. We'd grown a lot, comparison to a starting point. But I just kind of, no coaching but this was a personal coach that I'd sort of been working with for a while, just to help me sort of navigate my own mindset around some of this stuff, because I just wanted to lean into the opportunity. So now, everything in this role has been learned through speaking to other people, mostly. Speaking to people that are a few steps ahead of you on the journey, being vulnerable enough to say I'm struggling with this, and giving people the opportunity to kind of support, help, advise, direct, point you in the direction of somebody else that might be able to give you a leg up. I think it's amazing when every CEO I speak to, just how much everyone sort of falls into this and starts to work out the job as they go and their responsibilities. The fiduciary duties bit's a funny one because I think, I don't know how many founders kind of really understand that until they get into a process and start dealing with investors because, when it's you and your business and you don't have a lot of investors around you, you do have a lot more free rein, a lot of ability to kind of just flex around. And when you've got a lot more structure and governance around you, you suddenly feel that lack of experience, I think. And that's when you need to start to really lean into getting more support. And certainly when I got PE into the business, there was a lot around the investment agreement and articles like, wow, I need to really fucking understand this stuff because there's a lot more, there's a lot more at risk here, both for the business and me personally. And that's when you realize the gap between the investment community and you as a founder. Sometimes it can feel like quite a big gap.
Yeah. You mentioned, obviously I work as a business sounding board with people and I think the first thing people need to do is as you said, is sort of hold your hand up and go, I need some help. And actually it's not a sign of weakness. It's actually a show of strength because you're investing in yourself by doing it.
Completely.
You talked about the incubator. How was that specifically a financial incubator, or because people talk about peer-to-peer groups which work really, really well, and sort of basic startup incubators? How was it? How was that sort of sold to you? And structured?
Yeah,
what did it cover?
It wasn't an incubator as such. It was more like I think there's all these words: accelerator, incubator, scale up. I mean, crikey, what does that all mean, and how are they all different? I don't think anyone's got a proper definition. They're just usually something that runs for a period of time, a series of workshops, a peer groups that have got something in common, either the stage they're at or the sector they're in. And usually there's founders, right? And in my experience, people parachute into these workshops that are experts in that specific subject that you're there to talk about, learn about, and focus on. And that there may be an opportunity to pitch to investors, and possibly that organisation, accelerator, incubator, will possibly participate and take a percentage of your business should you raise money at the end of it or give you some cash. Whatever you call it, that's kind of the same thing. This PwC wasn't putting any money in. They asked us to pay £5,000 each to be part of the program, which is what we did. And there wasn't any percentage of the business or anything around that, but it was just a period of time and a series of workshops and a peer group. And we were all technology businesses, sort of pre-Series A in Leeds, in Yorkshire, actually, because we did have a business from Hull, Gary Gallen from Radar. He's really successful. So some really interesting Shield from White Label Loyalty and people like that. So there's a real cohort of us at the time. Phil from Audacia was on it. So, I could name some of the people that you'll know well that were on that first cohort. But the main thing that I got out of it was meeting the wider advisory investment community and them knowing who I was. And that really started a two-way communication that helped me to learn and go, I don't understand what you're saying. So one moment I remember, because I was on this, I got invited to FinTech North to sit on a panel to talk about investment. I remember loads of people coming back up to me at the end because I sat on this panel and I basically said, I have no idea what any of this means. Series A, Series B, no idea. What's a VC different from a PE? When you talk about rounds, are you buying me a drink or are we doing business here? I don't know. And I literally talked in this way on this panel to a room of hundreds of people. And because it was FinTech North, there's a lot of people in the community from the finance and advisory community came up and were like, it was just so refreshing to hear someone talk. I says, well, it's true. And I just meet so many people like this. So I think getting that communication going so I could learn fast, so I could do what I needed to do, probably accelerated my ability to raise money, I think.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I think you mentioning imposter syndrome, and I suffer from the same thing. A lot of it comes from the bullshit that goes around that people talk about that people go, I don't understand that. And actually you go, you don't need to, it's a load of bollocks. So
this is what it actually means. This is what it really means.
This is what it actually means. Yeah. Okay. So just talk about the actually you talked, 100 PE houses, saw your stuff, you did 25 pitches. Was it a case of you having the choice at the end of saying, we'd like to go with you and you, or was it the other way around?
No, I mean, and to be fair to GT, they did a great job of controlling a process. So one thing I learned is create competitive tension, control the timeline. You get your IM out. You tell them they've got to let you know when they're going to be, if they want to have a pitch from you, and then you tell them they've got this day or this day, and you invite them to a place that you control. So in London, they came to Grant Thornton's offices, and the same in Leeds. So they came to us, and we backed them off, so they would see the net one PE house coming in as the other one came in. So you create a nice amount of capacity, and they did a brilliant job of that, to be fair to them. And then obviously controlled, heads of terms have to be out and back in by this timeline, and then feedback on those heads of terms. So we got 6 offers, which was great, and we sent out heads of terms with our no liquidating preferences, things that I didn't understand what bloody Scooby-Doo about before this process, and now I entirely have. I remember Jim Whittaker, what a love, with a whiteboard with me and Ken repeatedly drawing kind of new co and other kind of organisational structure. We could do it this way or do it this way, and then drawing lines on graphs talking about liquidating preferences and where shareholders sit on cap tables. And it was just, it was an education. We were learning about some of the gotchas, actually, and having a partner and an advisor that can help you understand, well, you probably don't want this, so you're better to ask for this now whilst there's competitive friction. And then the people that participate know where they stand on those terms and not try to negotiate those through the process. So that was really, really powerful as a process to learn about how you control the dynamics. So yes, we got 6 offers. We went back and got feedback and said, well, you need to improve on valuation, you need to improve on the options, and so on. And then we narrowed it down to 3. And the funds that were in the process that offered, it was Berengayer, YFM, NVM as was, Mercia, Maven, and I can't remember the 6th. That's bad, isn't it? YFM, the people that were in our business, obviously, and YFM. So those are the 6 in the end, and they were interesting, all northern-based funds. So even though we pitched to all the London funds, none of them actually made enough. And what we realised, and certainly going to London and pitching, was I had to sell the city first. Does it have a tech scene? Is there any digital sector in Leeds? Are you going to struggle to hire talent? So I didn't have a pitch slide for Leeds, but I should have done, because at the time there was a real lack of understanding, and most of the tech investment was in the city, and it's all generalist investors in the north of England. So it's changed now. It's changed lots. It's 2019, going back a while. But, at the time, and I think that was the barrier, that was just like, you could see their eyes glazing over. I don't want to get on a train up to Leeds to do board meetings, You could just see that they were, these investment directors of these houses in London were like, anything outside the 25, I don't want it. And I think as a female founder, there's an extra barrier there as well. There's just that little bit of extra. So you're in Leeds, you're a female founder. I'm not confident about the tech scene in Leeds. We'll walk away. I've got enough deal flow in London. I don't need this deal. Whereas in the north, there was less deal flow, and they knew more about the business and the history, and obviously the people that are involved. So we're in a good position, which meant we were able to negotiate good terms. And the seed investors that cashed out, because we did about 2.1 million growth capital being the money that you're going to use to fund your business for growth, and secondary, which is the money comes in and goes straight back out to invest in it. They didn't take all their money out, so they kept some of their shares in, but that was to give some of our original seed investors some of that money back that they'd originally gave with their return on it. And there was 2 million of that, so it was about a 4.5 million round, and the valuation of the business was well above where the seed investors had said, as long as you get this valuation, Zandra, then we're happy with it. And I got them a lot higher than that, so everyone was very happy.
Fantastic. And 2 things you mentioned there, I think, lead into, dare I say, 2 of your soapboxes, which is female founders and, 3 probably, the investment community in the north and Leeds as a tech city. So let's pull on those threads. Female founders, you're a big drum banger and supporter of that. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I think once you've experienced something, I've worked in the tech sector my whole career, and I'm so used to there not being many women in tech that you just kind of get used to it. And I just thought, and it was always so sad, right? The tech sector is such a new industry, and yet it's still got this terrible problem with diversity, which is something else I think needs addressing. So when I went into the investment community, and I was just like, God, it's worse here. It really did feel like the investment community had less diversity. And what I mean by that is, at least in tech, you had socio-economic diversity, I felt. You had lots of people from different backgrounds and different cultures in tech. But in the investment community, not only was there a lack of gender diversity, but it was often public school educated white men. that's all I was speaking to. So the demographic, the diversity was even narrower. So this kind of networks, or we've heard of this old boys network said, but people were doing business with people that they knew, and it was a very closed community, and it felt very hard to kind of reach into. So that really took me back, just going through the process as a female founder. And I did experience some of those things that, is often talked about, and just really felt that they didn't get me. And that was the curtain came down, you could see it in their eyes, and you think, and it felt like gender, it felt like that often. And so I experienced it, and then the more I sort of talk to people about it, the more I run a network called LeanIn Leeds, or have done, and set it up like 9 years ago now. So I was surrounded by women talking about their experiences in various contexts. But the more I started to talk to other female founders, the more I really felt that there was a problem. So I started to get involved in the agenda. I'm now deep in it, deep in it. So I've been on I was invited to be on the government taskforce for women-led high-growth enterprises. Anne Bowden, the founder of Starling Bank, invited me to join her taskforce. I've been on that for nearly 2 years. It comes to a close in March. We're just finalising our report, which has a series of recommendations. And I've piloted a programme here in Leeds, which is all about how do we address this problem? Like 2p in every pound goes to female-founded businesses. That hasn't changed in 10 years. It is incredible just how we've not moved the dial. And even though we can have all the data that shows that women are starting business at a faster rate than men now, even though we can show that young women have the same appetite to be an entrepreneur as young men do, even though we can show that data, we're not moving the deal. And there is something going on in that this barrier in access to capital and diversity. And I won't go into lots of the detail here, but what we're really trying to do is a practical intervention and roll out a series of regional boards where a city will take ownership of looking at how we accelerate capital into diverse founding teams, starting with gender, because it's the place to start. And actually, you've had on your podcast Alex Craven from the Data City, and we're using Data City's data to do data companies in Leeds. Alex's data, our technology is a data visualization tool to empower cities to understand their pipeline of female founders so they can better serve them with things like the PwC accelerator, where I don't have Josh ringing me up going, please come on, because you're the only woman. Where actually they're ringing up and going, we've got a female founder accelerator in the city aimed at your stage of growth, with investors that are looking to invest in you, that is really targeted and tailored to funds that are motivated to invest in female founded businesses that are the right type of investors, because you can spend a lot of time with a lot of wasted conversations and coffee room conversations with funds and investors and BD people from VC and investment firms that they're just not the right stage and the right fit. And as a founder, your time is so precious. So the better we can curate that access to those networks for women who predominantly have less access to networks than men, because they are less likely to know another entrepreneur, they're less likely to know a high net worth that can give them money, they don't have the same access to friends and family. There's a lot of reasons why women sort of start from a lower rung of the ladder than men do. So yeah, I think the more I've got to know about this agenda, the more I'm in it. It's hard not to be super passionate. I've also become an Ada Angel, and so Ada Ventures is a fund aimed at that very early stage VC firm, very focused on diverse founders. I've concluded 3 investments through Ada in female founded businesses in Leeds. I'm just about to conclude my 4th. I hope they're all businesses on your podcast in the next few years, because they're amazing female founders, all of tech startups. So it is about just getting some of these networks in motion and making sure we curate some better support, so that I'm not sat on a panel going, I have no idea what Series A and Series B is, that fun female founders sitting there going, I know what I want, I don't need to speak to, and and are really, really clear. So yeah, sorry, I am very passionate about it. It's really hard not to be, because I feel like I can make some change. I think so.
You're absolutely right. As the father of 2 daughters, I want them, and it's interesting. Jane Slimming from Zeal, who was on one of my earlier episodes. She's fantastic, but she said to me, very interesting. She said she came from a situation where she was told she could be anything she wanted to be, and I've said that to my girls, and I think we should be in that situation where female founders should be in that situation, that there shouldn't be those barriers. And yeah, from a listener's point of view, how can men, middle class white men like myself, support the initiatives you're doing?
Actually, we need allies, every stage, every gender, every background, because it's the only way we change anything. And the initiatives which are starting to get off the ground, it needs everyone to just get behind them, share them, introduce people into them. Lifted is what we're launching with Helen Oldham and Jordan Darg, so that's going to be the vehicle that we're using to kind of get this off the ground, and we'll be doing that from March. And yeah, we just need, and anybody's interested in supporting, whether they want to come and speak to the female founders, we're looking for people that can talk about their stories so they can learn from them, whether they're interested in investing, whether they can provide advisory support, coaching, the more support, the better. And we just want to curate that in a way that gives them access to the right people at the right time. I had a great mentor, Matthew Scullion of Matillion in Manchester, 1.5 billion valued SaaS business. Great to have people like that in your corner. And he always says it's stage commensurate support. But what he means is it's the right support, the right people at the right time. And it's the right time. It's making sure we make sure that these founders are speaking to the people that are most appropriate for that stage of growth and support. And that it's a very noisy world out there. If you don't understand it, you can spend a lot of time working it out. So, yeah.
You've mentioned a couple of things there, Ada and Lifted. There will be links in the show notes to both of those. So anybody who wants more information on that, they're in the show notes. I think it's an opportune moment now to talk about your how-to, because one of the things that I think female founders find difficult is getting out there and just physically being out there and networking and put their heads above the parapet. It's hard enough as a bloke to do that. It's even harder as a female. So Zandra, take it away with your how-to.
So there's a few phrases I use a lot when I'm doing sessions or workshops, and shy bairns get next, right? Good Yorkshire Northern phrase is that. So how do you go and ask for something you want but you might be afraid to ask for it, or go and do something you want to do but you're afraid to do it, right? And then the second thing that you often say is growth begins at the edge of your comfort zone, right at the edge of your comfort zone. So if it's feeling hard, it's probably where you're probably doing the right thing, right? And so if you know that there's something you want to do, how do you start? And it's always, God, you hear these phrases like eating elephants, don't you, in bite-sized chunks and all that kind of stuff. But it really is true. It's just taking the thing you want to achieve and breaking it down into what are the little things I can do every day that makes me feel a bit uncomfortable, but at least gives me some progress. And sometimes it isn't walking into a networking room on your own. Find somebody who's been to that event that and get them to walk in with you. Meet them for a coffee beforehand, have a chat about the event, let them understand what you're looking to achieve from it, and then walk in with an idea to speak to maybe 3 people. And don't worry if you've only spoken to 3 people. Don't go around thinking you've got to exchange business cards with people. If all you've done is have 2 or 3 quality conversations, and then what do you do after that? It's okay to follow up on LinkedIn and say, we said this, we shared that, here's a follow-up. So it's just chunking some of these things down and getting yourself out there. I think women are really good at actually being vulnerable. We're also very, very good at sharing our networks. We're very generous, in my experience, at sharing our networks. So sometimes it can be easier if you're in a room of people or you're wanting to ask for something, is to go up to, it's okay, go up to another woman, chat to them if that's more comfortable for you. Don't try and push yourself into spaces and places where it's going to be really difficult. You just won't do it. So find some allies that can help you on that journey. Do a little bit of preparation. Don't expect too much of yourself, but at least take the first step into each of those things. And just as an example, my daughter, we've been playing football with a boys' team for years, and I'd set up networks, I'd set up a business, and I've never kicked a football in my life. And my daughter came to me and go, come on, Mum, let's set up a girls' football team. I'm like, oh my God, okay, I have no idea where to start, what do you do? And she had this real belief in me. It's really hard when your daughter looks and goes, well, let's go set a football team. Okay. And we did, and we flyered the schools, and we turned up on the first day and we had 3 girls, and then I realized I probably need to learn how to be a coach, and I went on a coaching course, and 7 years later it has been one of the most rewarding and unbelievably amazing things I've ever done. If you'd have asked me 10 years ago if I'd have been a football coach, I'd have laughed in your face. Never played football, never been sporty in that regard. But watching the impact of grassroots sports on the confidence of young girls and young women, and building that wider network and community around them outside of their school groups, and how that serves them in later life, and the power of those networks. When I look at what happens in investment community and the business community, men have often had the benefit of these kind of rugby teams and football teams, these networks and circles they've grown up with, and relationships where they've won together and lost together. And that's really powerful, that connection. We need the same for young girls and young women, because those networks will serve them through the rest of their life. And I didn't go into setting up a football team with that mindset. My daughter asked me, I thought, I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. But having done it, I just see all of these layers of references into everything else I care about. And it's just because I kind of went, well, how do I start? Where do I start? Well, let's apply some schools. What's the worst can happen? So sometimes it's just, you can tell yourself, can't you, that you can't do something. I'm not a footballer, but it doesn't mean you can't help a group of girls to love football and learn football and grow together. So a lot of it is self-limiting beliefs. And a lot of it is trying to solve the problem all at once and not taking little steps. And I know that sounds quite generic, but honestly, that's worked so well for me every time I've had a problem. To just go, right, I just chunk it down and do those little things. And actually, every time you do something, it's always a lot easier than you imagine. In my experience, you make these things a bigger problem than they really are sometimes. Is that all right, Phil?
Absolutely. I mean, it's so true. It's so true. Stepping outside your comfort zone, just by nature of just stepping outside your comfort zone, is uncomfortable. But once you've done it, it's then part of your comfort zone. You go, right, okay, what do we do next? And you're right, small steps each time. Fantastic, absolutely brilliant, Zandra. Before you go, we ask all our guests for a shout out. So give us a shout out for a Leeds company you want to give a shout out for.
So Anna Sutton, who has exited her business at Data Shed last year and gone straight back into the startup community with her data refinery SaaS startup. She has not paused for breath. She's been a peer, a huge amount of support for me over the years, and great to have another female founder in data that we've been able to kind of share the journey of. But I have just so much admiration. She sold a business, got straight back into building another tech business and it's called a data refinery. So yeah, definitely one to watch.
Okay, there you go. Links to Anna and Data Refinery will be in the show notes. Zandra, it's been absolutely fantastic having you on. Really enjoyed it. I hope all our listeners got some useful stuff from us. Sure they will. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Phil. It's been wonderful.
Thanks for listening to this episode. I hope you found it interesting, inspiring, and of use. To make sure you don't miss out on any future episodes, please subscribe to the show. Go on, do it now. Do it now before you go off and do something else. Thank you. Much appreciated. Oh, and don't forget our fair deal. See you next week.